Rain-slicked streets glistened under the pale light of a dying street lamp, the wind carrying the scent of wet earth and rot. Somewhere in the depths of Ravenwood, an abandoned school loomed like a hollowed skull. Sergeant Marcus Hale and his K-9 partner Brutus had been called for what seemed a routine missing person case, but instead found a trembling girl curled in the shadows, whispering a name no one dared speak aloud. Her eyes held a terror deeper than words, and Brutus growled low, guarding her as if she were both prey and predator. What lay inside would shake the city forever. The call came in just past midnight. Ravenwood was a kind of town where emergencies didn't happen after dark, not unless they were unnatural. Sergeant Marcus Hale sat his patrol car outside the precinct, the glow of a cigarette ember reflecting faintly in his weary eyes. Brutus, his German shepherd partner, lay in the passenger seat, ears twitching toward distant noises only he could hear. The dispatcher's voice crackled over the radio. Sergeant Hale missing minor. Last seen near the old Ravenwood school. Neighbors report hearing strange noises earlier. Possible sighting of an unknown female. Hale leaned back, exhaled a cloud of smoke, and tapped Brutus's flank. Guess we're going ghost hunting. The drive to the abandoned school took 15 minutes, but felt longer. Outside the town proper, Ravenwood fell silent. Street lights ended abruptly. Only the headlights cut through the darkness, carving narrow paths between towering trees. Rain began to fall again, not heavy but persistent, like a whispered warning. The school was an unspoken scar on Ravenwood. Once a proud structure, it had been abandoned 20 years earlier after a fire that killed a student. Parents said it was cursed. Kids dared each other to go there at night. Most never did. Tonight it sat there, an empty hulk of peeling paint and broken glass, its windows gaping like missing teeth. The air smelled of mildew and ash. Hale parked 40 feet away, engine off. He stepped out, boots crunching on wet gravel. Brutus was instantly alert, ears high, tail low, growling softly. Through the rain, Hale saw her, a girl crouched in the shadow of the collapsed gym entrance. She was soaked through, her clothing ragged and plastered to her body. Her knees hugged her chest. She looked up, pale, terrified, eyes wide as if she'd seen something unspeakable. Hale's voice was calm but low. "Hey, I'm Sergeant Hale. You're safe." He kept his tone steady, careful. Brutus stepped forward, muscles taut. The girl flinched. I can't," she whispered, voice trembling. "They'll come for me." Hale glanced at the school entrance. "Who?" She shook her head violently, tears mixing with rain on her cheeks. Her lips moved soundlessly for a long moment before she finally spoke. "The shadow it's inside." Brutus let out a low, almost human growl. Hale's hand drifted to the grip of his sidearm. The hairs at the back of his neck prickled. He glanced once toward the school's yawning darkness, where twisted shadows seemed to crawl along the broken walls. The girl began to sob quietly. Hale crouched, keeping his voice gentle. "We're going to get you somewhere safe. You're not alone." She nodded once, but made no move to rise. Brutus sat beside her, his body stiff, eyes fixed on the school's gaping doorway. Hale glanced again at her, then at the darkened hall. A part of him wanted to pull her out and leave, but another part, a deeper, older instinct, urged him to see inside. He clicked his flashlight on. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a hallway lined with graffiti, shattered lockers, and remnants of a long-forgotten life. The smell of burnt wood lingered heavy in the air. Somewhere in the depths, something moved. Hale felt the weight of the moment. "All right, Brutus. Let's see what we're dealing with." He glanced at the girl, who shook her head again. "No, please." Before Hale could respond, a muffled sound came from deeper inside the school, a whisper that seemed to crawl along the walls. Brutus growled louder. The girl's sobbing stopped. She tightened her grip on something in her pocket, a small wooden box, worn smooth by touch. Hale didn't notice her at first. "What's that?" She looked at him, her voice trembling. "It's why they're after me." A sudden crack echoed from inside the building. Dust fell from the ceiling. The wind outside picked up, rattling broken glass. Hale's radio hiss was static. The girl pressed the box against her chest. Brutus stepped in front of her protectively, hackles raised. Hale took a slow breath. This wasn't a simple missing person case anymore. Something inside the old Ravenwood school was alive. Something that had waited a long time, and they were about to find it. Quietly. If this story is gripping you so far, like and subscribe for more chapters that follow this mystery. The air inside the old Ravenwood school was thick, damp, and alive with silence. Sergeant Marcus Hale stepped carefully, Brutus at his side, the beam of his flashlight cutting a narrow tunnel through the darkness. Behind them, the girl, soaked, trembling, her arms clutched tight around the small wooden box, followed in hesitant steps. Her boots made no sound against the broken tile floor, as if her fear had stripped her weight. The hallway stretched deeper, narrowing under the shadow of collapsed ceilings and twisted metal. Hale noticed the walls were scrawled with messages, words scratched into plaster in jagged handwriting. Most of it was unreadable, but one phrase repeated itself in uneven strokes. He waits. Brutus stopped. His breathing changed. Hale froze, scanning the air. The silence wasn't natural. Somewhere ahead, a sound began to build. Not footsteps, not breathing, but a dragging, metallic rasp. It was faint at first, then louder. "Stay close," Hale murmured to the girl, keeping his voice steady. She didn't speak, only nodded. Her eyes were fixed on the hallway ahead, filled with a terror that seemed far older than her years. They entered what had once been the auditorium. The air here was colder, and the beam of Hale's flashlight revealed a scene of chaos. Rows of splintered chairs lay overturned, the stage curtain shredded. The smell of scorched wood mixed with rust. At the far side of the room, a large crack in the floor pulsed faintly, almost as if it were breathing. Brutus stiffened, growling deep and low. Hale stepped toward the crack. "What is it, boy?" Before Brutus could answer, the girl cried out softly, clutching her chest. "No, don't!" She staggered forward, and Hale caught her arm. The wooden box fell from her grasp and hit the floor with a dull thud. Brutus lunged toward it, growling. Hale bent to retrieve it. The box was old, carved and darkened with age, with strange markings etched into it. As his fingers brushed the surface, the markings seemed to shimmer faintly. The sound, that dragging, rasping noise, grew louder, echoing through the auditorium. The girl whimpered. "They're here." Hale turned to her. "Who?" Her voice was barely audible. "The Watchers. They took my sister. They're coming for me." Hale's gut tightened. "Watchers?" She shook her head violently. Don't say their name." Her voice cracked. "They'll hear you." Brutus growled louder, his hackles raised. Hale glanced around the auditorium. The air felt heavy, thickened by something unseen. Somewhere deeper in the school, the dragging noise grew sharper, accompanied now by muffled whispers, low, urgent, impossible to place. Hale motioned for her to follow. "We need to get out of here." She resisted. "No, we have to stop them." Her voice trembled, but there was determination in it now. "If they find it, it'll spread." She tapped the box against her chest. "It's the only thing keeping them out." Hale studied her. This wasn't a child lost in fear anymore. This was someone carrying a burden. Something dangerous. Something she was desperate to protect. A loud crack echoed somewhere above them. Dust rained down. Hale's flashlight beam caught movement. Long shadows twisting along the walls. Crawling toward them. Brutus barked sharply, charging ahead into the darkness. Hale grabbed the girl's arm. "Run!" They sprinted down a crumbling corridor, the dragging noise now close behind. Hale's boots echoed in the hollow building. Somewhere ahead, a door groaned open. Hale pushed her inside. It was a classroom, stripped bare except for desks piled in the center and an old blackboard streaked with chalk writing. "It knows." The girl sank to her knees, clutching the box tighter. Brutus sat guard beside her, ears forward, growling at the shadows shifting beyond the cracked windows. Hale drew his sidearm, scanning the darkness. His chest tightened. This wasn't just a missing person case anymore. Whatever lived here, whatever hunted this girl, was tied to the school, to something buried long ago. And the girl, she wasn't telling him everything. From somewhere deeper in the school came a low, guttural sound. Not human, not animal, but something older, something patient. The girl looked at Hale with wide eyes. They're here. Hale tightened his grip on his flashlight. We'll find out what they want. The dragging noise swelled, surrounding them. Somewhere beyond the classroom, in the heart of the ruined school, something waited. Something that had been waiting for a long time, and they were not going to let it go quietly. The classroom felt suffocating. Rain tapped steadily against the cracked windows, a soft but unrelenting drumbeat in the silence. Sergeant Marcus Hale sat with his back against a cold wall, Brutus curled protectively at his side. Across from him, the girl, soaked, trembling, clutching the wooden box as though her life depended on it, stared into the shadows. "You need to tell me what's going on," Hale said quietly. His voice carried weight, not authority, a man speaking to someone whose trust was hanging by a thread. The dragging noise, the whispers, the watchers. What is it? She flinched at his words, as if speaking them aloud might call something forth. "I shouldn't tell you. If you know, then they'll know." "They're already here," Hale said, his eyes scanning the cracked ceiling and the dark hallway beyond. "And you're still not telling me everything." Her lips pressed into a thin line. Finally she spoke. "This box, it's a seal. The school, it was built on something older. Something that shouldn't exist. My sister found it years ago. They came for her. I ran, and now they're after me." Brutus growled low, the sound vibrating through the room. Hale followed his gaze toward the door, where shadows pooled unnaturally. They moved without form, coalescing like smoke given shape. The dragging sound was closer now, a slow, deliberate approach that filled every corridor in the building. The girl's voice dropped to a whisper. "They can't be stopped unless the box is returned to the heart of the school. But if we open it, we risk everything." Hale leaned forward. "Everything's already at risk. We can't just leave you here." She looked at him, her eyes filled with something he didn't understand. Fear, but also resolve. "You wouldn't survive if I told you the whole truth. You'd run, and then they'd hunt us both." A metallic creak echoed from the hallway. Brutus lunged forward, hackles raised, barking with ferocity that echoed against the stone walls. Hale drew his weapon and stepped toward the door. "We face this together." The girl nodded once, barely audible, and opened the box. A pulse of cold air swept through the room, carrying with it whispers, voices not entirely human. The box contained an object wrapped in black cloth, carved with runes that seemed to writhe under the flashlight's beam. Hale felt the air shift. The sound of dragging became a chorus, scraping, whispering, something breathing deep and slow. Outside the classroom, the darkness pulsed like a living thing. The walls trembled. The girl said, her voice breaking, "It's the heart. If we don't return it, they will tear the school apart and the whole town with it." Hale nodded grimly. "Then we go." They moved the crumbling hallways together, the dragging noise behind them growing louder, more insistent. Each step felt heavier. Shadows followed them, pressing close, whispering their names. The school seemed alive, breathing. They reached the basement, the original foundation of the school, untouched since it was sealed. A great stone archway loomed before them, carved with runes identical to those on the box. The air was colder here, and the shadows thicker, almost tangible. The girl approached the archway. Her hands trembled as she opened the box fully, revealing the carved heart inside. Something unnatural, black as tar yet pulsing like it had a heartbeat. Brutus growled low, growl turning to a deep, warning bark. Before she could step forward, Hale touched her arm. "Are you sure?" She looked at him with something like desperation and sorrow. "This is the only way." She stepped through the archway, holding the heart above her head. The runes glowed faintly. The dragging sound became a roar. The shadows surged forward and then stopped. A moment of silence. Then a shuddering exhale of air that seemed to come from the building itself. The darkness receded. The air warmed. The box closed. The whispers died. The hall was still. The girl collapsed to her knees, exhausted. Hale knelt beside her. "It's over." She looked at him, shaking her head slowly. "For now." She stood, holding the box against her chest. "But it will come again. They always do." Brutus lay beside her, eyes scanning the shadows. Hale looked around the ruined school, the weight of what they had done pressing down on him. Somewhere deep inside, he knew Ravenwood would never be the same. They stepped out into the rain. The streets were quiet again, but the memory of what they had faced lingered in the air. A silence, so heavy it felt like a living thing. Hale glanced at the girl. "What's your name?" She looked away. "Names don't matter." She disappeared into the night, Brutus following silently. Hale stood alone in the rain, the sound of dripping water, the only thing that remained. The city slept unaware. But somewhere, deep beneath its surface, something stirred.